songs of generation. Music is the soundtrack of revolution. Music is the soundtrack of movement. Music is the soundtrack of cause. There is an intersection of politics and pop culture that you didn't even know existed. There's some boy, some girl sitting in a cubicle along K Street, somewhere in DC. A boy, a girl sitting in a cubicle along a hill with a Capitol with a dome, who has single-handedly decided what you wore today. Whoa.
Mike Muse is an industrial engineer, a music executive, a political architect. He breaks down the intersection of politics and pop culture. This is the Mike Muse Show.
What's happening, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome back to the Mike Muse Show here on Thanksgiving Eve, man. I'm super excited for Thanksgiving. There's this big debate in terms of what is the favorite holiday for individuals. Is it Thanksgiving? Is it Hanukkah? Is it Christmas? And for me, it's Christmas. I don't know why. I'm more of a Christmas guy. I love the tree. I love the presents. I love doing like taco night on Christmas Eve, or maybe Chinese food on Christmas Eve. And I look forward to doing my family does this big lobster and champagne brunch, and we have a really fun dinner. And then we go to the movies. And so it's just so much fun. And then we play like the Motown Christmas Carol classics all morning. Oh, and also too, by the way, starting on Christmas Eve, I watch A Christmas Story 24 hours on loop, on rotation, constantly. But I've been talking to a lot of my friends, and everyone loves Thanksgiving. I feel like Christmas was like the minority holiday now. I feel like everyone's into it for Thanksgiving, and of course these Friendsgivings. This is a thing now. So I think the first thing was an ugly sweater craze, and so I think we're still doing that. Every time I get invited to an ugly sweater, I actually do not wear an ugly sweater. I actually wear a pretty fly sweater. I just can't get into the ugliness of things. Hey, what can I say? I'm beautiful. But no, all jokes aside, though, Thanksgiving is a major holiday, and so I'm super excited. I know you guys can't wait to be with loved ones and eat all that turkey. Question, tweet me right now. Do you guys fry your turkey? Do you roast your turkey, or do you bake your turkey? I prefer fried turkey. So hit me up on Twitter at I am Mike Muse, M-U-S than Sam E, and let me know how you take your turkeys, man. I'll be curious to see. And I actually think you should also check out Heather B and the Fly XM to see what she's baking and cooking up in terms of her fried turkey. So make sure you check her out too as well. But listen, Thanksgiving is here. I couldn't think about during the holiday time period. This is when we really start thinking about charity, and this is where we really start thinking about philanthropy, and this is where we really start thinking about give back. And I'm so thankful that we do have that time period around the holiday season to do that. But don't forget, man, there's other people in need 365 days a year, so we should also keep that in mind consideration. And you know me, I'm the guy of intersectionality, so I couldn't help think about policy when it comes to Thanksgiving, when it comes to food, when it comes to food deserts, when it comes to food insecurities, and the policies associated with how we even got there to begin with, and why we need food banks, and why we need soup kitchens, and why we need food pantries, and where are we with food pantries and soup kitchens, and what do people who run food pantries and nonprofits and food banks even think about the current state of our, I don't want to say our economy, but more so the state of affairs when it comes to how we view poverty, and how we view food, and how we view food policies, and are we even talking about it right? You know, how should we be framing the conversation? A thing called the Farm Bill that's being circulated right now is a possibility that needs to get passed within the United States Senate committee. As you guys know, I love the Agriculture Committee. It's one of my favorite committees within the Senate to talk about. We had Senator Gillibrand on this show before, as you know, and we really got into a wildly fascinating conversation about that. And so the previous Farm Bill expired, and so they're looking for ways to bring it back. And so I couldn't think of a better person to help guide us and moderate this conversation through food policy and through Food Bank and through the Farm Bill and what it means for poverty and hunger in America than the dynamic president and CEO of the Food Bank of New York City, the dynamic Margarette Purvis. What's up, Margaret?
Hello, Mike.
How are you, superstar?
I'm wonderful.
Welcome to the Mike Muse Show.
Well, thank you for having me.
As you guys are about to celebrate 35 years.
Yes, 35 years of serving soup kitchens and food pantries and the most vulnerable New Yorkers in our city.
I just want to say God bless you for that. I think anyone who does service a nonprofit, and particularly on the level and scale of New York City, is a saint. It just always needs to be thanked and patted on the back and offered a cup of coffee just to say job well done, because one, to be 35 years in, and you have been at the Food Bank for approximately 7 years, I believe.
As a CEO, 7 years, and then before that I was a vice president for 6.
Okay, so do the math. That's 13 years.
Yes. Yeah.
So doing service for 13 years in this dynamic can't be easy.
No.
It can be emotionally draining, I'm sure,
Yes.
and physically draining. And you have to bring your whole self into that.
Yeah.
And the way you have kept the Food Bank of New York City on the hearts and minds of New Yorkers has been amazing. So cheers to you for that.
you, Mike.
So listen, before we get heavy,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
What's your favorite holiday? Thanksgiving,
Well, I'm gonna
Christmas,
tell you.
Hanukkah, Kwanzaa. What
Well,
are you?
It used to be Thanksgiving until I heard about your Christmas.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here trying to figure out, how do I get an invitation to the champagne and lobster? Like, really, Mike?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's
Really?
pretty cool. My family now looks forward to that now. We've scrapped the Christmas dinner.
I'm going to put in some complaints to my family because ours is feeling real grubby now that I heard how the Muse family gets down.
Yeah, you know, it's easy. It's so much easier and simple, right? In terms of time constraints.
Did you just say it's simpler to have champagne?
Yeah. But think about it. You guys just grab the lobster. And audience, I'm very aware it's a very privileged conversation. This is absurd. I've definitely just recognized that. I acknowledge that. No need to troll me. No need to drag me. No need to even at me. Fight me if you want to. I get it. And like the irony that I'm talking about food bank and poverty and food insecurities, I'm talking about this meal. I'm fully aware. I'm fully aware of the contradiction and the irony, but I have.
But it sounds fabulous.
But
Just so you know.
just
I will say this. I have always loved Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
For me, it's just kind of the culmination of all the family tradition of, all the favorite dishes that my granny would make and all those kinds of things. However, since working at the food bank, by the time Thanksgiving comes around, the last thing I really want to see is a turkey.
Yes, that's the least of your concern.
I don't like turkey at all anymore.
Yeah.
Though before this, I've always loved fried turkey. I'm a Southern girl.
Yes.
So, fried and smoked.
Oh, I love a smoked turkey.
Yes. And a blackened turkey, too. That is also another.
See, I haven't had a blackened turkey.
yes.
Okay, let me go further then. Do you inject your turkey with like infused marinades? and all that
I
good
just
stuff?
inject a credit card number onto wherever we're going to order. Yes, I am more a connoisseur of turkey. I don't know how to cook a turkey. Not even a little bit.
Yeah, me neither. And I think this is why we did what we did.
Exactly.
And I think the solution for us is because, fried turkey can be dangerous.
That's true.
Yeah,
I'm going to use that as my excuse. That's why I don't know.
Yeah,
because it's dangerous.
It's dangerous. You got to have the right oil, which is highly flammable, the peanut oil, and then you have to have the right, thing to fry it in. It has to be large enough to carry the amount of the turkey. It has to have garage. It's just so much with it. But I will tell you this, listeners, if you haven't had a fried turkey, once you have it, you would never go back to oven-baked turkey again.
Ever.
Like I refuse. I just cannot do it. Right? Just cannot do it. Well, happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
I'm so happy to have you here on the show, really just discussing this really important issue.
It is.
And the reason why I think I'm comfortable in having this discourse is because so many of us have this discourse, right? So many of us talk about where we're going to be for Thanksgiving, right? The idea that we can even catch a flight for some of us to go home for Thanksgiving. Yeah. And Thanksgiving is when the airfares are the most expensive.
Yes.
And the idea that we actually have a home to go to, right? And then the fact that we actually have enough in our refrigerator and in our own pantries in our home to host upwards to 4, 6, 8, in some cases 20 family members when you add the cousins and you add the grandkids. And some of us never have to think about the budget and what that cost, right? And so that's why I'm comfortable in having this, because we have to bust that notion of privilege, right? That no one doesn't have it.
When it comes to the holidays, you just cannot hide poverty.
Yes.
I think that's the part that I've heard the most from clients, the people that we serve, is when it gets cold, you can cover things up. You get a coat, you can cover up maybe that your items are not as new. But the holidays is about coming together. Yeah. And the diet, the menu is so specific that it is not as easy to explain why you don't have whatever it is that you don't have. I think it was maybe 2 years ago, I met a woman. We were down to like the last 4 turkeys. And at this point, we're at the end, or so we thought. And we were grateful to be at the end. And we had 4 left and we're about to go. And suddenly, here comes a family at the door. So we were like, oh, gosh, you know what? We'll just give them 2 turkeys. We tried to give it to take them. And the father said, no, we only need 1. Somebody else could need it. We're like, no, they're not, because we're going home.
Yeah.
He's like, nope, only need 1. He leaves. He's barely passed. Here comes another person, another family.
Wow.
We try to give them 2, because now we have 3 left. They say the exact same thing. No, please don't get, we only need 1. You never know. Woman comes running down the street, Mike, coming from the bus, thinking she's missed the program. We're telling her, wait, slow down. It's okay. We have another. Yeah. I give her the turkey, and at this point, I kind of make a joke to my team, like, okay. I look down, like, there is nobody else. Turn the lights off. Let's get out of here. I looked down the street, but I thought I didn't see another client. And that's a bias that I had, because there was a white woman. We were on 116th Street near Frederick Douglass. And she walked to the door, and I said, hi, how are you? I'm about to close the door in her face. Yeah. And she's like, do you guys have anything? I was like, oh. Yeah. And I kind of paused for a second, and she looked at me and said, I just found out my family's coming. I cannot let them know what's going on. Wow. And she said, I'll take anything. Wow. And you just got it in a way, because in that moment, what she's really saying is, I can hide it any other time, but how am I going to tell my mama why I don't have some stuff in, or just simple things, because she had no money. Yeah. And it taught all of us something about just reminding us again, hunger has no look. It does. It has no look. And more, it just looks like a regular old New Yorker, Mike. And that's what we're seeing borough by borough. You know, across our city. We just recently did a report, and we were talking to the leaders of soup kitchens and food pantries, and that 80% of them told us we're seeing more people. And it's not just that they're seeing more people. It's a lot of people. And it's who they're seeing. They're seeing more senior citizens. They're seeing more families with children. They're seeing more people who have never visited a pantry before. So that means you have more people who are educated, more people who are working. You guys, pantries, soup kitchens, these things were established during Reagan's time. It was supposed to be temporary, and it was supposed to be for homeless people. These programs weren't made for families. They weren't made for people who have jobs. That's not what was supposed to happen. And that is happening, not just in New York City, Mike, it's happening across the country. And because there is so much shame for when you are poor, or when you appear to not be able to take care of yourself, it's a reason for people to not say anything. Because you don't want people to think you're a bad parent, or that you can't, that you're lazy. When the number one driver to a pantry in New York City, places like Brooklyn, it's the rent. Another driver, cost of food, rising. We're seeing a 27% increase in food across the city just between last year and this year. In Manhattan, it's almost 46% increase in a year, Mike. It's unbelievable.
That is. We're in a period now where we're using the word dignity.
Oh, yeah.
Dignity of work.
Yeah.
And dignity of self.
Yeah.
And that recently came up when the actor from The Cosby Show was spotted at Trader Joe's. Yeah. And it was almost a shaming moment because here's this gentleman who was on this hit show. Now he's back in groceries at Trader Joe's. And then it became this dignity of work, as if his work wasn't being valued. And it really represented individuals who bag the groceries, who ring our orders up, don't have a value. And there's this dignity associated with it. There's a potential 2020 nominee candidate, Senator Brown from Ohio, who also was talking about this last weekend. We talked about dignity of work. So I feel like that's going to be this new narrative in our country in terms of dignity of work. But we actually don't even talk about it, though, to go further. What you're addressing is this dignity of self.
Absolutely.
And how we look at individuals who may be in need, and we always want to place blame on them.
Yes.
Margaret, what do you say to Americans out there who believe that it's their fault that they can't afford a turkey for the holidays? It's their fault that they aren't able to provide for their children?
Well, the first thing I would say is something I would always hear my grandmother say, which is, but for the grace of God, there go I. Before you point a finger at someone, you don't know what life's circumstances could result in for you. Some of our clients could absolutely pay for a turkey, but it would mean that they would likely not be able to pay rent. So now they have a turkey, but the possibility of being homeless. We have more people who are in the system in New York City, homeless, everybody, homeless, than we've had in our history. That's not happening because people are just willy-nilly making a mess of their lives. The national average for the percentage of your income that should go towards rent is 30%. National average. In Brooklyn, it is over 60%.
Wow.
So this is just pure numbers. Pure numbers.
Yeah.
This is not about something someone is doing wrong. And the reason it's imperative that we change our minds about this is because, let me tell you something. If you do not address it when it's not you, then who are you expecting to address it when it possibly could be you?
Exactly.
Hunger is solvable. And while I run a food bank, I am very clear we cannot food bank our way out of the mess that we're in. We have got to be way more careful about policies. We've got to participate more. I was loving, you and I were talking before, how many Americans think United States Department of Agriculture has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you. And too many people, specifically in urban areas, are not paying attention. It's not spoken about as much as it should be, but it is imperative for us to be able to understand how the dots get connected. Because I tell you, the shame is making far too many people be silent, Mike. And you have no reason to feel like you have done something wrong because you don't have enough money. That has nothing to do with whether or not you're a good parent. Can you imagine if our grandparents were judged on their love of us, their ability to create a Mike Muse based on how much money they had? It really is a disgusting thought.
It is.
And we should call it out that way.
Because the value system has changed and what we deem as successful.
Yes.
Right? And part of it is social media. There was this notion in a time period, like maybe in the 90s and the 80s, this whole narrative of keeping up with the Joneses. Now it's about keeping up with those influencers on social media, right? And those who post this lavish lifestyle, whatever that is.
That's not
them.
real in most cases.
At all. It is not real life. And it really goes to perception. I know we're using Thanksgiving as a hook for this conversation, but you're actually raising some really important things. And I focus a lot on the wholeness of individuals and almost everything that I discuss. And I'm always looking at the totality and the ecosystem of individuals and circumstances around them. So I know Thanksgiving and the holidays really highlights those who are in lack, right? And that mental stability that they have is never more apparent than during the holiday season. But what about during the times of February, March, April, May, June, July, August? Talk to us a little bit about the perception and how they feel during those time periods versus where they are now. And then how does mental health play into that?
Well, I will tell you, number one, Food Bank of New York City puts this study out not because hunger is worse right now at Thanksgiving. It's because we have people's attention at Thanksgiving.
Call it what it is. You're here.
That's true.
That's when the media begins to focus on it.
That's when we have the attention. So we made sure that we aligned this study for this period of time. However, guys, actually one of the hardest times for us in our network is the summertime.
Wow.
It's when the children are out of school and the parents now suddenly have to cover those meals that the school used to cover. That is the toughest times. The lines are longer, way longer. Another time for us would obviously be winter. All of winter, not just the holidays, because we actually now will have lots of volunteers, lots of people excited to come in. But man, we just need people on a regular old Tuesday. A regular Tuesday to show up in a consistent way. That is what means the most. So I think a lot of our members feel unseen. The reality is that our network has changed. Food Bank was created by soup kitchens and food pantries to serve them. And I think initially they meant just organizing food. Over time, we've learned it's more important to organize information and awareness. Because one of the biggest issues with hunger, Mike, is that the people who are suffering from it are often unseen. And so are the charities who are doing the really hard work. One of the parts of our study, it showed that in our neighborhoods, we noticed that hunger is not really experienced the same way. Meaning, two families could certainly both have no money. But based on where they are and the charities that serve them, completely different. set of situations. If they're served by a charity that has access to getting them on SNAP, to helping them with rent vouchers, a lot of those things maybe can happen in Manhattan, certain parts of Brooklyn. But if you're out in parts of Queens, or if you're out in the South Bronx, your poverty is harder just because it's more difficult to get the help.
Yes.
So the charities that are there, they are poorer. The poverty is deeper. The communities are just denser. So it's like in those things that we call the meal gaps. It's just, life is just more difficult.
So let me ask you a question then, Margaret. Do you believe that our government is comfortable in cutting the budget when it comes to these type of programs, or when it comes to SNAP, because they believe there's charities and nonprofits that are out there that will, they believe, help make up the gap?
I think that is something that probably is assumed. It's certainly something that is said, but it's just not possible. One SNAP application, a completed SNAP application, is equal to a full-on pallet of food. We can't food bank our way out of this. Part of why it's easier for people to just kind of say, cut SNAP, is because of the bias associated with who everyone believes is on SNAP. The reality is $1 of SNAP spent returns $1.79 back to the local economy. There is no set of math, numbers, anywhere where it makes any kind of sense to cut SNAP. That is a place where you basically are cutting your own throat. You're cutting your own community. Name a program with that kind of return that would be threatened.
I want to do more of a deep dive in that because you're raising two issues.
Yeah.
So I'm going to focus on that, and then I'm going to come back to the point that you made earlier. So this is double down to make sure it doesn't get lost in our listeners.
Yeah.
So when an individual receives their SNAP benefits,
Yes.
And we see when we go to stores in our
Yes.
neighborhoods and grocery stores, we see EBT cards accepted
Yes.
here.
Yes.
Is that what you're referring to in a
Yes.
sense of when an individual on SNAP goes and makes a purchase in that local grocery store, that local grocery store actually benefits from it because the food is being purchased from there? And then, Margaret, then what I'm hearing is then that's tax revenue for that
Yes, it
area,
is.
for that school district that goes back to assisting. So essentially, it's recycling this whole dollar value that only benefits the person receiving the benefits, but also to the merchant that's actually on the other side end of receiving the actual swipe.
And the farmer.
Come on now.
And the farmer.
Okay.
A SNAP recipient actually probably receives the least benefit from a SNAP benefit. Everyone else is basically getting paid first. Because if there's a cut, I may not get as much food, because like if you look at the cost of food, New Yorkers on SNAP, y'all, they're not getting all that far with it just because the cost of food is so high here. But that farmer is going to be paid regardless. The grocery store, the employees, it really is, everyone is getting a bite of that apple first before the person who actually is in need.
Because now we're going to a whole notion of entitlements.
Absolutely.
Right? Because when we talk about entitlements, we always think about the Black single mother who's on welfare, who is taking our entitlement benefits. And we don't even think about the white mother who lives in rural America, who is actually receiving these benefits that they may or may not call WIC.
Yeah.
And I'll let for you to talk about that a little bit more. But also, too, now we're talking about the entitlements that farmers receive from the Agriculture Committee.
Yes.
Farmers actually are getting paid not to farm. We've seen legislation that's passed recently where there was a tariff battle ensuing between a certain couple of countries, actually, between China, between Canada, between Mexico. And as a result, those farmers have been impacted based upon the soybean delivery.
Yes.
Well, this administration has decided, well, I'm going to cover that with insurance that's been taken out of a pot of money that's designated for disaster relief.
Yes.
So we actually have a war on tariff that's been created by this administration. I'm not here to debate the merits on that, but let's just for linear, logical conversation. There's this tariff war that's existing that some would say that's been created.
Yes.
Some would say out of necessity, some would say out of not necessity. But as a result, now we're going to reach into that pot of money and cover the farmers now, which is an entitlement.
Yes, it is.
So it's interesting how we only talk about entitlements when we believe that is only servicing those of Black and brown communities.
Yeah.
But not those who have hundreds and thousands of acres of land and farm, but also those who live in rural communities.
Absolutely. Listen, SNAP, WIC, these are nutrition programs. Say this again. SNAP, WIC, They're nutrition programs. This is not welfare. It is not cash. It is food, everybody. It is not, while it is being politicized, it is not political. It's just a way for people in need to have food. All the things that you hear about, oh my gosh, there's all this corruption. Not true. This is not from Margarette Purvis. This is not from Food Bank for New York City. This is from our federal government. The SNAP program actually has the lowest percentage of fraud than any other government program. That is not from us. That is from the government.
Wow. Well, with that being said, Margaret, now we're getting into perception, which I want to talk to you on the opposite side of this break. Ladies and gentlemen, tweet us your thoughts right now. What do you think about this conversation? What is your perception of it? What is your bias? How are you vibing this conversation, and what's coming to your mind? Make sure you tweet us at I am Mike Muse, M-U-S-N-Z-A-M-E, and here at Insight at SXM Insight, and we'll be right back.
Why so sad? Walking around with them blue faces. She said I'm down on my luck, and it's something I gotta have. Blue faces. I hit the bank today and told them color me back. Blue faces. Yeah, that new money, and it's breaking me down, honey. 2 tears in a bucket, I cry with you. But I can never lie with you. Let me tell you that everything is everything. Everything is everything. Everything is everything.
Ladies and gentlemen, man, welcome back to this awesome dynamic conversation that we're having here. This has been a eye-opening experience for me, really hearing the president CEO of the Food Bank of New York City talk about this lens of perception, talk about this lens of dignity of work, talking about policy, and really talking about biases when it comes to poverty and when it comes to hunger here within our nation, within our country. You guys, look, you're enjoying this conversation as well. I'm seeing the tweets from you all in terms of what your thoughts are on biases and perceptions. I'm going to respond. Don't worry about it. I'm even seeing some of the turkey shout outs too as well, which is really cool to see. So really glad you guys are engaged in conversation as always. To a dialogue at I am Mike Muse, M-U-S-N-Z-A-M-E. Also to on Insight at SXM Insight. Margaret, you said something really interesting, and listeners, when she said it, it made my eyes just go wide for a moment. Talking about the most busiest times, or maybe the most busiest times, but when organizations like the New York City Food Bank are in need of support and help is in the summertime. I never thought about the notion of children standing in line with their parents in June and July and August, because now the parents have to cover those 2 meals that the schools usually provide. And my listeners know that we've had conversations here regarding education, and as always, keyword focusing on the whole individual, the whole student. And I've always discussed that it's so difficult when a child goes to school hungry. How can then we expect them to learn the calculus, Shakespeare, English, math when their stomachs are rumbling? And I didn't even think about what happens to that student in the summertime when now they're in lack. And what that means for them as a human. But then also too, what that must mean mentally for their parent.
Absolutely. In New York City, Mike, there are close to 400,000 children who rely on soup kitchens and food pantries for dinner. So when you think about that, my best visual I can give you, or best visual I like to give people, is that's about the same number of people who live in the city of Miami. That's just poor children in the city. So it's put us in a position of realizing we've got to do the work differently. That's too many children having pantries and that experience as a part of their childhood. And I'm a person. I'm from Mississippi. We certainly were not rich, but I didn't know we weren't rich. That was something that my grandparents, my mom, they took very seriously. She would do things. I still remember the Life magazine where the Kennedys were on the front, and they were on the yard and had White House black shutters. I remember my grandmother just looked at them. She's like, "They're no different from us. We got a White House black shutters. It's a bunch of them. It's a bunch of us. We're the same." But that was the stance. But I wondered, how do you get to grow up thinking possibilities and truly believing you can do anything when growing up in that situation? So we've decided we now have several pantries operating out of schools. We call them campus pantries. They are in elementary schools. We actually have placed many of them in the poorest communities in our city. We put them there specifically so that one place we knew, because we did a survey of some of the parents, and we found that one of the hardships was that a lot of programs are not open at night and they're not open on the weekends. And the moms who we serve are in hourly jobs. And if they don't get there, they are risking the possibility of losing that job. So we put the pantries in the schools because one place we know a mom is going to come is to the school to drop the baby off and pick the baby up. And we got the pantries to work with us so that as the children go to class, mom can do all the shopping while she's there, take the groceries home, and all the kid knows is that we just have dinner.
Yeah.
Where the food came from, it doesn't really matter.
Listeners, I hope you're listening to this, and this kind of is where we start the conversation off of kind of just acknowledging your privilege.
Yeah.
And it's as simple as when we talk about students should be more successful than they are, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. That is often said from a place of privilege. And if you grew up never having to worry about 2 square meals in the summertime, heck, 3 square meals in the summertime, you don't know what it's like to suffer through that and what that does to you mentally. And it's even, if you're hungry for an entire summer, it's difficult for you to dream of possibilities of what your life could actually be when you're just trying to get through the day, the afternoon, and the evening time when it comes to that. So you've taken me to a place now where I'm actually curious about. And let me back up. Let's broaden this conversation out because I know listeners have been talking a lot about New York City.
Yeah.
The work that you do, Margaret, is representative of the work similar to other Margarette Purvises across the country who are in big cities, little cities, urban cities, and rural cities.
Yeah.
So I want you to talk to us a little bit now on placement of pantries because I'm going to start digging deeper into food deserts.
Yes.
And then really to talk about the difference between rural and urban. Because I feel like we always talk about it from an urban perspective, but rural communities are equally as impacted as well.
Absolutely.
And in particular when it comes to food deserts and where their pantries may be placed at or lack thereof.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, sometimes when I talk to CEOs from other food banks around the country, it is always surprising to me some of the programs that they don't do, not because they've never heard of them or that they don't want to do them, but because maybe they live in a community where poverty and hunger has been so politicized that if they go towards SNAP, they're scared that my donors don't like SNAP. So I'm not going to do it. I said, but you know that it works. It works better than what you're doing. Nope, can't offend the donors. I only have but so many donors in my city.
Wow.
We hear that all of the time. There are some food banks who don't offer fresh produce at all.
Wow.
Everything is shelf stable. Some of the food is, or a lot of the food is not that healthy.
Is there a reason why they don't do fresh produce and fresh vegetables?
Sometimes it's about capacity.
Okay.
Whether it's their own capacity or their charities where they don't have an ability to hold it, or they don't do a delivery system like we do. Like we actually deliver 130 meals per minute. We have tractor trailer trucks. We have a 90,000 square foot warehouse in the Bronx. But a lot of places around the country, charities still have to come to the food bank, or even individuals come to the food bank, and they just don't have some of the same kinds of capacity or opportunities. So food banks are different around the country, but what is true for all of us is that a food bank serves food pantries and soup kitchens. I know a lot of people like to call everybody a food bank. It's not true. The food bank is what serves the food pantries. And the food pantry is where individuals go to do grocery shopping, basically. But yeah, depending on where you are in the country, you may go there and it may be half of it junk food or just very shelf-stable food. That's it. No produce, no dairy, none of that. We are very blessed in the sense of New York City that we have commodities that our city provides, that we have a state program here that provides for green vegetables, dairy products that goes to the Department of Health. And then obviously we have the commodities from the federal government. And we just have a lot of really generous donors, like a lot of generous food companies who give us fresh food. Sometimes it's really based on the fact that maybe like with Fresh Direct, orders did make it. So when your orders don't make it, it ends up at Food Bank for New York City. So we love a mistake and we pray every day that they never fix the mistake because it's really great produce that we get. So we're really grateful for that. But I tell you, Mike, sometimes it's those differences that can sometimes, I think, stymie solutions. I am here at Food Bank for New York City, but I do the work every day as a Mississippian. I always do the work thinking about the possibilities that I wish people who are in the communities where I grew up, that they would have that same kind of points of access. Our food bank does the SNAP work. We train the members on how to put people on SNAP. We have an ability to zap people directly onto the system because we have a good relationship with the city. But we also do a free tax program. And we do that because there's a lot of people who are the working poor. And our charity now brings an average of like $75 million in cash every single year back to this city, to some of the poorest people, because we do that. But that's because we take a totally different look at poverty. I think when you start at a place of truly believing nobody's done anything wrong, and that our push is not about what makes rich people comfortable, but our priority has got to be what makes the hurt of poverty lessen.
Yeah.
That has got to be the priority. And it is offensive to talk about anything else.
Yeah.
And too often, Mike, we're seeing that becomes, the conversation. I mean, when I look sometimes in media, you don't understand how powerful. I'm trying to keep it non-weepy just in having this conversation, because we never get to have a true conversation really about what's going on in our community. People hear things like you mentioned earlier, the tariffs, trade mitigation. Well, there's going to be new food coming into our system. And every reporter has written about it as it's a big bonanza. Woohoo! Look at all this food, as if we have ended hunger. Yeah. Because food is going to come in from the federal government that has no dollars for us to move it. And let me tell you something. I'm not crazy. Certainly, I'm grateful to have this extra food because we need it. But that food is the back end of problems with the tariffs. And because no one really takes a look inside of philanthropy in a critical way, with a critical eye, it's being called a bonanza versus, how did this food get here? What is this about, really?
Which is why it's important the reason why I created this show really is to do deep dives and to connect the dots and to find the nuance and to go beyond the talking points. I believe so many shows and media are obsessed with talking points and don't want to go further than that, because to go further, it makes others uncomfortable. And to go further means you actually have to do the work. And to go further means you have to do the research.
Let me get an amen.
And to go further means you have to know the data you have behind of it. And you have to know how different communities move and work and operate.
Absolutely.
And a lot of media, they don't do that. They go for the moment. So yes.
Well, that's how
the Food
Farm
Bank,
Bill, that's how so many people missed. We lost billions of dollars of food, everybody. That's money that impacted everybody's local economy. And there should have been a public outcry, Mike. But because it was called Farm Bill, no one realized that was one of the most urban pieces of legislation. It hurt the poorest inside of your city, the brownest, so many women, elderly people, children. It hurt so many people. And it went by because it was allowed to hide in an acceptable bias. There is an acceptable bias against the poor.
It is. And what Margaret is alluding to, listeners, is that since 2003, cuts to SNAP have cost New York City residents more than $1 billion in lost benefits. And that's just New York City. Again, nationally, what has it done to cities like Baltimore? What has it done to Topeka, Kansas? What has it done to Los Angeles, California, and Detroit, Michigan?
And we're lucky enough in New York City, and I don't even like the word lucky, but I'm going to use the word lucky in this situation, that we have had a great partnership with our governor who has doubled down on stopping some policies that would have really devastated the poor in our state. And we have a commodities program here in the city under HRA that also provides a line of food. We just recently had this first historic increase. I hadn't had an increase in years, but that happened. But I'll tell you, so many of these things are happening with soup kitchens fighting, with charity leaders fighting, and they really should have everyone fighting.
Well, let's go there, Margaret, because on my show, I love to do part soapbox and then part action and solutions, but also to activism. And I redefine activism in so many different ways. And I used to believe that activism only meant standing on the corner with a petition or doing rallies and marches. And those are great and needed. And yes, that is activism. But activism means so many other things. And a lot of times in politics, when we have political discourse, we're led to believe the only thing that we can talk to our local officials about are taxes, healthcare, and education. But we could, if poverty is a passion point of yours, if helping the hungry and those most in need are a passion point of yours, you can turn that passion into activism. So how then should our listeners be engaging with our local elected leaders, our state elected leaders, and our national elected leaders to really help bring poverty issues and dynamics, what you're talking about, to the forefront, because we can.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think, and my listeners, they know this by now, that we can do it all. We can bring whatever it is that we want to the table if we choose it. And how these issues get addressed is when the public and the community begins to demand it. And at these town halls that you're going to see so frequently, listeners, because now we're in 2020. So we're in 2020, you're going to see these candidates out on the stump coming to your Iowa State Fair. They're going to come to all your barbecues this summer. They're going to come to all your Easter programs, you know, in your churches to really get your vote. And so I ask you at your town halls to question them about this. And so how should they be thinking about this, Margaret? Like, how can the community advocate for things that can help? Help us help you, basically.
Well, the first thing is raise your awareness. It is not hard to get informed about services to the poor. The biggest weapon that we have for poverty is to shine a light on it. Because let me tell you, so a lot of stuff is hidden. And it's not just about questioning your elected officials. Do you have a favorite? Let's just say you have a favorite foundation or favorite group that gives money, says that it addresses poverty. You should ask more questions. Who's getting that money? Here's why that matters. Many people, we talk soup kitchens and food pantries. What we never say is that these are small charities. And at Food Bank, we call them, the Food Bank serves the poorest charities located in the poorest communities, serving the city's poorest people. Many of these charities are led by women of color. I cannot name one of them. I'm talking about 1,000 charities. I cannot name one of them that is currently being funded by a major philanthropic organization in this city.
Wow.
They're just not getting those grants when they are doing a yeoman's job.
Wow.
But they're not getting a yeoman's nickel.
Wow.
So, but these things happen when no one questions anything. I think when you're elected officials, if they're going to be giving dollars away, every city council member has a budget that they give dollars away.
I was about to ask you that because, you know, I talk a lot about the power in local government.
Yes.
And I believe a lot of times people become disenfranchised by the political system because they think this on the presidential level.
Yes.
Right. And the president's actions doesn't affect my day to day. But I always tell individuals, one, yes, it does.
Yeah.
But also, two, okay, I see how you may say that. But let's focus on your governor and your mayor and your city councils.
Yes.
Now,
Change happens locally.
Yeah, this may just be, and you may only can, and it's fair if you can only give your point of view from the New York City local government perspective, but citizens, I will ask you to challenge your own local and look into your local government too as well. How do you guys work with New York City local government? So, you know, do you guys work in hand with your city council members to allocate budget and fundings? Do you guys work with the mayor or the mayor's office to make sure you guys are able to reallocate funds? Do you guys lobby the mayors for when it goes to budget time period to make sure line items are allocated to you? So talk to us a little bit about that. But listeners, think it through in your own local municipalities as Margaret is talking.
So one of the best things, no matter your city, one of the best ways that you can work with an elected official as a charity is to provide them with information. You know, you're going to have a perspective that no one else will have. So one of the first things you should always be doing is making sure every person understands the charities and the people living in poverty who are also their constituents. We provide all of the elected officials with maps, numbers, the names of the charities that are in their neighborhoods, when they are operating, who they're serving, so that it is very clear who you represent within this. We also make sure that they understand numbers like, hey, we serve 1.5 million New Yorkers. That is more people than were required to elect the mayor. So you've got to be able to have them understand that, no, we're not here hat in hand. We are your constituents as well. So as things change, we keep them informed, and every person can do that. You can also read up on the policies and make sure that your elected official understands the differences, meaning when there are things like public charge, you know, and obviously we're not going to go into all of that here, but every listener should know what the public charge debate is. At the end of the day, we are now looking at people who are in this country legally, who are now scared to death. They are contacting the WIC office, SNAP office, all of these programs trying to pull their information out of the database because of the administration's latest proposed change, will basically say you may possibly not be able to access citizenship simply because you received help. Now, no one ever talks about the taxes that immigrants pay. Immigrants pay a heck of a lot of taxes. So this idea of them being a drudge on society, it is ridiculous. People who are being targeted by this particular policy, Mike, they are not only here legally, they are often parents of American children. The parent is not getting any benefit, but their child may. Their child is an American, completely entitled to these things. But we're also seeing a horrible situation where where immigrants are all treated like they're illegal. And that is something that should scare everyone. So if you want to help your elected official, even just letting them know you've heard of public charge and you're watching what they're going to do. You are expecting them to use their voice. You are expecting them to not allow bias to strip your city of dignity, to strip your community of any economic power from SNAP or all these other programs, and to strip families of nutrition and food. It can be something as simple as that, to just say, hey, I'm watching. Even if you don't really know what you're talking about, Mike, you can just call out public charge, I'm watching. SNAP, I'm watching. Where are you on this? How are you helping these charities? It may seem like it's not a big deal, but let me tell you something. It is a big deal. I actually had one of my board members one day, because we always take our members to Washington, D.C. every year. We put them on a bus and we take them up to Albany to do advocacy. Oh, that's something else you should be doing. But one of my donors said to me one day, says, you know what? I actually think some of these elected officials probably care a little bit more about what I think than maybe these soup kitchens. Yeah. So, well, then get on the horn. And you guys, we've had U.S. senators fly in to New York City to meet with us, not because Food Bank for New York City asked them, but because my donors, who we only know them as just being, okay, a person who's helping us with the soup kitchens. No, they also pay for campaigns. Yes. And it's about looking at your partners a little differently, looking at them strategically, Mike, to say this is everybody's job. And even though you don't work at a food bank, you care about this mission, use your voice to impact people who are not regularly seen. Every person can do this. Another thing is, have your children get involved. One of the top calls that I receive, Mike, it's often from very wealthy New Yorkers who call me as children or maybe either high school, about to graduate, and they'll hear their kids say something. It's like, oh my God. I've gotten calls like, Margaret, I think my son is scared of poor people. Yeah. Or my child is scared of people who are different from them. How did this happen? I know that I haven't said racist things. I haven't done bad things in my house. Why is my child not comfortable? Because you haven't had your child have the experiences that they may need to have. Right.
What's interesting, Margaret, about this whole dynamic is you and we can talk all day. And what this means is that you have to come back for part 2. Yeah. So we can keep the conversation going and really highlighting some of these key issues. But I think what I'm going to be taking away, and my listeners know I never know where I'm going to land the conversation. Yeah. They know I don't have any prepared questions, and I never know the conversation because I want the conversation to be natural and organic. But what I'm taking away is the biases and perceptions that's associated with poverty. And as a result of the biases and perception related to poverty, then therefore it's easy to cut budgets. Yes. It's easy to look the other way. Yes. And it's easy not to care. Yes. So I think the biggest takeaway is just really to help change the narrative of poverty. You know something else? And to really bring dignity.
You just made me think of something else, Mike. This must be from the good Lord. I'm supposed to say this. Mike, you know what else we need from your listeners? We need more young people, women of color, men of color to actively pursue leadership at charity organizations. There's a lot of money that's in philanthropy that's going into communities all over, yet not a lot of board members. In the 7 years I've been a CEO, I've never received one phone call from a woman of color ever to call me asking about board membership, though I get a call at least once a month from young white males in banking. And I'll say, do you volunteer with us? Do you deal with the food bank? No, but I'd like to be on your board. Yeah. And it's a thing, and it matters very much that we're not participating, because let me tell you something, that's a different type of almost legislation. It is. Because they're making decisions about where money's going and where it's not going. And not only are we not at the table, Many of us are not even asking to be at the table, and it's important that we are.
Just one thing I want to clarify. I don't want the listeners to leave without being clear. The difference between SNAP and WIC.
Yes. Well, first of all, they are both nutrition programs. One WIC program is for the mother, for obviously women, infant, and children. A mother can be on that program up until the age of 5 years old. Each state will have a certain allotment, and then they break it up by the communities. When it comes to SNAP, whether you get it as an EBT card, whatever, you can purchase all kinds of items. It's not just a predetermined list. Now, you can't get prepared foods. You can't do junk food. In New York City, you can't do sodas or anything like that. But it operates as cash. It actually comes on a card. You go to the store and you're able to use it. And you have your monthly allotment. So you can use it as many times as you want throughout the month. But you also will often find that maybe on the surface, the people who receive SNAP versus WIC may look a little differently. We actually have found probably more use in more suburban areas of WIC because WIC does not have the same
negative
connotations or income requirements. So you could actually be in a pretty wealthy, even let's just say maybe Trump supporting community, and there's a high usage of WIC. Covering the same kind of food, everybody's needing help. WIC is such a great program because it could also be that you're needing help because many children cannot produce or cannot process milk. Yeah. So soy milk, one can cost you $25. So you can go really and truly broke or just not be able to really get what your baby needs. Yeah. But yeah, SNAP has probably, someone told me this once, they were like, SNAP has the worst marketing of any program out there. Yeah. And it's because of the bias.
Yeah, it is. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to Margarette Purvis, the CEO and president of the Food Bank New York City, here on the Mike Muse Show. Really unpacks so much wonderful information when it comes to biases and the dignity of human beings when it comes to poverty. Thank you, Margaret, for bringing the human interest to the story, helping us unpack the biases and the need to fill in the gaps. Citizens, as always, you can hit me up at I am Mike Muse, MUSSAME, for more questions and engage in this conversation. Always on Sirius Insight Channel 121 at SXM Insight. But Margaret, where can people reach you? Most importantly, where can they reach the New York City Food Bank, and how can they donate?
They can come to our website, www.foodbanknyc.org. Please come on by. You can establish your own fundraiser. You can donate food. You can find a place to volunteer. It's one-stop shopping for compassion.
And your Twitter?
Food Bank
NYC.
4 NYC. That's it.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Mike Muse Show. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Enjoy all the food, the sweet potato pie, the pumpkin pie, and however you make your mac and cheese. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we out. See you next week. Peace.